Every year at this time, we've always hosted mole sewing classes for Mr. Carpico's class. Due to the COVID-19 restrictions, we are unfortunately not able to host those classes this year, but we have come up with some alternate ways that you can still make your moles for your class credit. Our first way of making the moles is still using the sewing machine and making a book a librarian individual appointment in our makerspace at the Louisville Public Library. Just call the library to schedule that appointment. Our other method, which is what I'm going to show you here today, is a way to be able to make your mole at home. We have grab bag specialized made kits at the library that have all the materials you need. And I'm going to walk you through a tutorial video today to show you how to hand sew your mole from home. I'm not going to demonstrate sewing machines because I know not too many people have those at home. So we will use the old traditional method of sewing by hand, which is also a great skill to learn for everyday life. To show you, here's an example of what your little mole will look like. In the video, whenever I'm demonstrating, I will be making a larger scale mole just so it's easier to see what I'm doing and follow the steps on camera. Now, our first part of our training for the moles today is a sewing safety rules and guidelines presentation. Doesn't take very long. It's just to help you stay safe and properly use your equipment and materials while sewing, because there are some sharp objects and we don't want anyone to get hurt. So let's begin with that. One of the first rules you'll always want to know when sewing, and this all applies to hand sewing and using a sewing machine, don't ever put the pins in your mouth. Sounds kind of crazy, but it is a common thing to try to do. I don't know how to explain it. You just instantly always want to hold a pin in your mouth. Don't ever do that. That's not sanitary for one, and two, it's definitely not safe. You are working with a lot of different sharp objects. You should definitely keep shears or scissors closed when not in use. Don't leave your scissors folded open and laying on the table. If you have someone helping you or in the room with you, always pass sharp objects by the handle first. Don't hand them by the pointed end of the scissors. And walk with blades pointed towards the floor. So your scissors or your seam rippers, you always want that sharp part pointing away from you. And if you ever drop something sharp, don't try to reach down and catch it and fumble. It could stab you in the hand. Just let it fall and then pick it back up. Seam rippers. That's the picture right there if you don't know what a seam ripper is. It's a little object with a handle with a sharp point on it. They are very sharp. They have a point on them, and then in that little curved part in the center between the 2 points, it is like a razor blade because it does what it is called. It rips out seams. It will slice through many layers of fabric and thread all at once. When you're using them, you always want to be pointing and pushing away from you. Don't ever bring your seam ripper coming back towards you. You always want to push away. And also do not cut towards you or cut towards your hand when using scissors. You always want to be cutting away from your body, so you don't risk stabbing yourself or cutting yourself. Some other general concerns when sewing. You always want to keep your floor area clean to prevent any accidents. Always watch and be cautious if you drop pins or needles, if you drop your scissors. Don't let all them sharp objects and things just fall and lay on the floor. Pick them up immediately. And this even applies at home. Always keep your shoes on when you're sewing. There could be that occasional pin that you drop you don't realize you drop. And if it gets stuck in the carpet, you won't see it, and it's going to go right in your foot. So when you are sewing your mole at home, I highly recommend you do keep your shoes on until you have thoroughly cleaned up the area when you're done and made sure that there's nothing on the floor. Now, I love our little animated lady here to wish you safe and happy sewing. Few more pieces of information. is about your mold making supplies. The supplies that will be provided in those grab bag kits that you can pick up at the library will be the fabric, the stuffing, the felt, which is this extra thick material for his little feet and nose, and the pattern. All key items that you do need to make your mold. Supplies that you will need. You will definitely need a sewing needle and some thread. You'll need scissors. You should really have a seam ripper, but if you don't, you can get away with just using scissors on this project. Pins you will need for pinning your fabric to your pattern so you can cut it out. So those are just called straight pins. A pin cushion is suggested because it's nice to hold the pins so they're not just rolling around on the table. These are all very inexpensive items. They can be picked up at stores like Dollar General, Dollar Tree, Walmart, here locally, and if you would have to buy everything on this list, you could get it all for around $5 or $6. So just so you know, the few things that you will need to make your mold that you do have to purchase, you can get very low cost. And just to show you an example, this is the pattern. This is what your page will look like that you pick up at the library. And you will have to have one of these. You'll cut out one on the fabric to make the bottom of your mold. You use that other part to cut out two parts of the fabric to make the sides. So we have the bottom and the two sides. And then you'll use the little feet pattern to make 4 little feet, and the little star to make him a little nose. Pretty simple. Well, that's the end of the slideshow, so now I'm going to go into showing you how to make the mold. Okay, to begin, I'm going to show you all the supplies and everything I have out and ready to make our mold. First of all, I have my fabric to make the mold's body. And I have my large scale size copies of the pattern, which is the part to make the two sides, and the part to make the bottom, or his belly. Then I have the felt, which also has the patterns to make the feet and the nose. Then I also have my thread and needle. I have 2 colors out because I have purple for my purple fabric and green for my green feet, but it doesn't matter. You can mix and match colors however you want, make your mold really fun. I also have the seam ripper, scissors, and the pin cushion with pins. Now, to go through demonstrating how to make the mold, I apologize, I'm going to go off camera a little bit and have the camera focus down on the table on my hands so you get a nice up close look at all the steps so you know how to make your mold. Okay, to begin, we're going to get the parts of our pattern cut out onto our fabric. And to do this, you'll want to lay your fabric face down. So that means the ugly side of the fabric up. Now my fabric here and some of the fabric that you get may not really have a side that you would declare is the ugly side or the good side. So I'm just going to kind of pick. I think I'm going to keep the pinstripes on the inside of my mold. I'm going to use the other side as the outside part. That'll look nice. I'm going to start out with making one of my belly shaped pieces, or the bottom. You lay that down on your fabric. You're going to use your pins. Only ever take out 1 pin at a time. And you're going to want to push the pin in, and it's going to come all the way out the bottom through the fabric, and bring it back up. So you'll see as I pin each part, both ends of the pin are showing on the top, but it's hooked together. You're pinning the paper to the fabric. And there's really no set pattern to go around like every so many inches. Just kind of use your best judgment. Just make sure that it is held in place and that that fabric is secured to the paper. One other key point, you want to make sure that the pin is staying on the fabric. You don't want the pin overlapping over the paper onto the fabric, because you're going to be cutting around that perimeter around the edge of your template. Okay, now that we have our template from our pattern secured down onto our fabric, we're going to get our scissors and we're going to cut them out. Now you do want to cut out just one piece at a time, because there's a little trick to cutting out the two sides, so please don't jump ahead. And then also, you don't want all these pieces of paper with pins stuck in them all over the fabric you're trying to work with. Keep your task simple. Just work with one piece at a time. So to show you how we're going to cut it out, get in, and you're wanting to cut as close to the edge of that paper as possible. Now here's the good part. It does not have to be a perfect cut, because whenever we sew our mold pieces together, there's going to be just a little edge, like a hem, that's going to stick out of the fabric, and when we turn him inside out to get the stuffing in him, those little edges, those edges that we're cutting, will be on the inside of the mold. You won't see it. So don't worry about a nice, really good, crisp, clean cut. It's not going to matter. I'm going to kind of cut off the edge here so I can get all that fabric out of my way and make this easier. And just go ahead and continue to cut out the rest of your mold. Okay, now that you have your first piece cut out, you see the paper pinned to the fabric, you're going to want to go around and take out all your pins, put them in your pin cushion. If you wasn't able to get a pin cushion, try to at least have like maybe a little tray or a small bowl to put your pins in, something to hold them so they're not just laying around the table. I don't want anyone getting stabbed while trying to make their mold. Now we will take that pattern, lay it off to the side, lay that piece over there out of the way. Now we'll start on cutting the sides of the mold. Now for the first side, you want to make sure you got your fabric laying out the same way. I have the striped side up. You want the same side up as you did your bottom. Lay out your pattern. Yeah, we'll lay them out this way. And same thing, you're going to go around and you're going to pin your pattern to the fabric, just like you did for the first piece. So go ahead and pin your pattern down. Now that you've pinned down this pattern, same thing, cut around the edge. After you've cut out that side of your mold, again, take your pins out. Put them back in your pin cushion or the tray, the little bowl, whatever you have to hold them. Now for the next part, you're going to see with our molds, oops, if I can grab mine. you're going to see with the moles, we have the belly, which was this part. The sides make up these two halves. We're going to use the same pattern piece, so that way we have the same symmetrical shapes for the sides, but there's a little trick to it. We want to cut an opposite mirrored image of this side. So you will lay your fabric out just like we did for everything else, the same side facing up. The easiest way to do this, to make sure you do it right, is you're going to lay out one side of your mole that you just cut with that side facing up. And you'll see the pattern was like this on the fabric. You're going to want to flip it. We want like a mirrored image of the mole. It may not make too much sense right now, but you'll see when you start putting your mole together. So now that you have your pattern template laid out the correct way on your fabric, it should look like this. It should look just like your mole's facing a mirror. You want to take your pins and again pin it down and cut it out. And then when you've removed the pins and your paper, you should have your 3 pieces of fabric, all the same sides of the fabric facing up, and all 3 of your pieces should look just like this. Now we're going to move on to pinning our pieces of fabric together so we can start sewing. So you're going to want to lay out your fabric just like so. All the same sides facing up. You should have your pieces laid out exactly like this. So take a second to look at that, and it should be the ugly side of the fabric facing up, the side that you do not want to see. The sides of the fabric that you want on the outside of your finished mole, that should be what's facing the table, what's down. Now to start pinning your mole together, we're going to start with just one side. And what you want to do is you're going to take this center piece and just kind of fold it in half. It may not perfectly match up on the edges, that's completely fine. And then you're going to take your one side and you're going to lay it on top. And just try to get them edges to line up the best that you can. And I'm going to tell you right now, your tail, bottom end here, and all through the belly and the leg will match up really good. And whenever you get up here to where the nose parts are going to match, it's going to look completely off. That's totally fine. We'll get it all to match up whenever we pin it and sew it, I promise. Then, it's just a matter of pinning your fabric together. Now you want to make sure you're just grabbing the top layer of that part underneath that you folded. You don't want to grab all of it. You want to leave that bottom part, the bottom half folded, down on the table. And you're going to take your pins. Make sure you're going through both layers of the fabric. You're going to push it through, just like how we pinned the paper to the fabric. You're going to go through the bottom and come right back out the top. Always pushing the pins away from you. And I got mine a little crooked. That happens. Straighten it up. I'll push it through. And again, no real set pattern here on how far apart the pins need to be. Your main focus is just trying to get the edges of the fabric as close together as possible. Try to get them edges to line up as you work your way down, pinning it together. You might want more pins than what I have. That's quite all right. I've made quite a few moles, so I don't need too many pins. And sometimes them pins are a little stubborn to get in there. There we go. Alright, now to show you the real tricky part. Actually, I'm going to turn my pattern around just so it's a little easier to see. We need to line up our edges of our fabric going around from the arms up through the nose. So, you actually kind of have to go on a little hunt for that fabric. And let's see, I got it right down here. I try to make sure I line up that joint that goes between the leg and the head. And then you're going to want to line up out to the tip of the nose. So our piece of fabric that was underneath that we folded, and then the top part of the body that we just put on, you want to line up the tips of the noses. And when you're done pinning this, it's going to be all crinkled and folded and wonky, and that's totally fine because it will line up as we sew it. And then plus there's going to be little puffs and creases and things sticking out because that's allotting room to put the stuffing in the mold. Now we just pinned along the belly, so from the tip of the tail, around the arm, and up to the nose. We do not pin along the back. Not yet. So now that you got that part on, we're going to sew that part of our mold together. Now a quick little sewing tutorial if you've never done hand sewing before. You have your needle, which has a little hole in the top if you can't see that. That's called the eye. That's where you're going to put the thread through. You're going to pull your thread off the spool. You don't want a whole lot, just enough to work with. If you get it too long, it'll tangle as you're going through sewing. It'll get all tangled up in itself, and you don't want that. You're going to take your thread, and if you're not real used to doing it, or depending on the style of needle you have, it might take a few tries. You want that thread to go through the needle, and if you have mom or grandma or somebody there assisting you with this, they might tell you to thread your needle differently than I am. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. I pull my thread all the way through to where both ends meet together, and then I tie it. There are other ways of doing it. If someone at home is showing you a different way, that's completely fine. This is just the way I've always done it. So again, I threaded the thread through the eye of the needle, and I pulled it through to where it gave me 2 strings that I pulled out evenly at the end and tied. Now, I'm going to start down here and work on putting my needle through the fabric. And it's just a matter of pushing the needle through, pulling it. Now you're going to want to tie it off at first. This is what's going to hold your stitch in place so it doesn't end up pulling out of your fabric. I just pulled it through. My knot that I made is holding my thread in place. And I'm just going to take another loop through around, which just makes it secure itself. Now, also, there are many different styles to doing hand stitching. You might know of a different way than I'm going to show you. Someone at home might be showing you a different way. That's completely fine. I am no master seamstress. I'm showing you methods on how my grandma taught me to sew. I'm just going back underneath through the bottom, and then I'm coming out this side, going back around again, and I'm going to continue that down the whole way that I pinned, the whole side that I pinned. So again, all I'm doing is putting my needle in through here, pulling it out one side, and then coming back around and putting it in again from the bottom. So it's just putting it in through the bottom and just looping it around. That's just to show you in case you're not sure of how to sew. Again, someone at home's telling you different. It's quite all right. There are so many different ways of doing this. So let's finish sewing that all the way down to the tip of the nose. Now, this might have happened to you, or it may happen as you're making your mole. You realize you ran out of thread before you completed what you're sewing. That's completely fine. All you're going to do is loop around like you're getting ready to make another stitch. Pull your needle through, but don't pull that thread all the way through. See, I left a loop of thread, and you're going to push your needle through just like you're tying a knot. And I do that like 1 or 2 more times just to make sure it stays tied. Then it's just a matter of cutting off that thread. Get rid of that little bit of excess thread off the needle. And then just rethread your needle again and start like we did in the beginning. Now I'm not going to need too much more thread here because I don't have too much of my part of my mole left to do. Again, I put it through the eye. Tie a knot. Tie it again. And then I'll just pick up where I left off. And don't forget, when you restart, you're going to do that loop around a couple times, making a little knot, going through that loop like we did when we first started, just to secure that stitch. Oops. And then just keep looping around. And you'll see even as I'm going here, I had my thread get a little tangled. Don't worry about it, because what all you're seeing here, the part that you're looking at as you're sewing, that's all going to be on the inside of your mole. You will not be able to see all this ugly mess that we're making in creating our moles. Your finished product will be hiding all of this. And then just be cautious as you're going around that real crazy area we had with the legs and the nose. Again, you're still going to have some really ruffled up edges and parts sticking out. That's completely fine. Okay, now when you're getting down to the tip of the nose, you want to try to make sure as much as possible as them 2 points are together. Now for me, I'm going to pull my safety pin, my straight pin out, straight pin. And I'm going to make sure that that bottom piece is folded over and then all the tip parts of my nose are there together. And again, just the top 2 layers, the bottom half of that folded part does not get stitched in. And then just sew right down to the tip of the nose. And then we're going to tie that stitch off. Give it a good couple loops around. And cut off your thread. Now you want to go through and make sure you pull all your safety pins out. Straight pins. They are straight pins. You want to make sure you got them all. Then you're going to fold this piece over. See, we're all hooked together. Go ahead and lay everything out. Now we're going to do the same exact thing going to the other side. I'm not going to walk you through step by step. It is the same exact thing. Just to show you to start, how to get it started so you know you're pinning it together right. We're going to lay all this out completely flat. Give it a flip. So that belly part, you see this piece here, the belly is facing up. And again, we're going to fold it over because we sewed the side to this side here, so now we're going to sew this side to this side here. So give it a flip. Make sure everything's lined up. See how the arch of my back goes from the nose to the tail. And again, you're going to go through and on that folded layer that's on top to this side, we're going to pin from the tail, around the belly, up and around to the nose, and then go through and stitch that. Okay, now that we have our 2 sides sewn together, your fabric should look like this. The ugly side of your fabric facing out, which is the part of the fabric that you don't want your mold to look like. The good part of the fabric that you want to use to be the outside of your mold should be on the inside. Just to kind of flop mine around here to show you, so you know how yours should look. Now your edges might be curled or flattened a little bit differently depending on what type of stitch you used. But all through the nose should be sewn together, out the arms, around the belly and the tail. And if we flip that over, it should look like this. You should be able to open up those big curved backs of the sides. So right in here is your bottom and here are your 2 sides. Now the next part's pretty simple. You're going to want to lay your mold down with the nose and the arms facing you. And the part where the bottom is going to be a little folded and scrunched up. That's okay because we're not doing anything with that right now. You mainly want to have the back spine edges lined up. And we're going to start down at the nose. You're going to pin that together, go through and pin all that together along the spine. And then you're going to sew it, just like we sewed the other parts. You'll thread your needle, you'll do a double stitch down here at the end to lock it in, and then you're going to go through and sew all the way down. And go ahead and do that, but one important step. You're going to stop sewing, about a good 4 to 5 inches from the tip of the tail. So you're going to sew along the whole spine, but stop right about here. You want to leave an opening on the back end. So go ahead and pin and stitch up your mole's back. Okay, now that we have finished sewing along the spine, along the back of our mole, and remember, we left this back end open. We left this opening here. So whenever you finish sewing, you should have definitely tied off your knot right there, so that way that stitch stays in place. Now here's why we left this open. You're going to take your fabric, you're going to reach your arm in, and you're going to turn it right side out. Just like if you're turning inside out a pillowcase or a shirt. Mine's going to be a little bit easier to turn inside out because it's the bigger mole. Your smaller mole, you're going to have to be doing some tucking and pushing with your fingers. Because whenever you do turn it the right side out, you want to make sure them little arms get pushed all the way out, his nose gets pushed out. You might even need to use like a pencil or something to stick down inside your smaller mole to really push out the legs, just so you know. But after you get them turned right side out, your mole should look like this. Then we're going to go back to that opening that we left. And this is where you're going to put your stuffing. I'll have a lot more stuffing than you because I've got the supersized mole for filming purposes. And it's really up to you how fluffy you want your mole. You could just put a little bit of stuffing in so he's kind of soft and cuddly, or you could put a lot of stuffing in so that way he's a nice, really solid, firm, plush little critter for you to keep around. And it might be using your fingers to really tuck that stuffing in, down into the legs and into the nose. You want to push it down in there. Now, whenever you do stuff your mole, once you feel you got enough stuffing in there, you want to really shove your stuffing, really pack it to the front of the mole. You want some loose fabric to work with back here. So that way it gives us room to close up the stitch, to finish sewing up our mole. And keep in mind, after we've sewn him up, you can squish and move and push all that stuffing back down to the other end so he's nice and even. Now I'm going to show you how to close up the stitch on the mole. It's not like when we were sewing it before where you just pulled the pieces together, because you don't want those ugly edges showing on the outside of your mole. You see how whenever we sewed before, after we turned it inside out, that ugly stitch is hidden. You don't see them frayed ends or anything like that. It's a nice, clean look. So I'm going to show you how to do that nice clean look, sewing it with the right side out, because we're not going to be able to do the whole inside out thing after we sew. So you're going to take your needle and thread, just like I showed you before, same exact way. I'm going to thread that needle. Okay, now to get started, what you're going to want to do with your fabric is you have them ends that we cut off, your edges. On each side, you're going to want to fold that in. You turn this around here. So you see I'm just kind of giving a little flip over and folding it in. And I'm going to hold that together. Now you're not going to be able to hold the entire thing together. And really, it's really difficult to pin this and sew it at the same time. This one's just kind of using your hands. So you're just going to kind of tuck them in and hold them in place as you're going through sewing it. So I got the first little section ready. And you're going to want to start by sticking your needle inside, down in between those layers of fabric, because that's going to hide the end of your thread. And a little bit still might stick out, a tail of the thread, which is okay. We can get that with the scissors later. And the same type of stitch I'm going to use. They'll come in from the back and go in and go out the front, just looping around. And as I get further down, I'm just going to keep grabbing a little bit more of that fabric, folding the edges in, holding it in place as I run the needle through. So go ahead and keep doing that, working your way down and closing up that opening on our mole. Once you're done, you have completed locking your stitch. And like I said, you can kind of shake them around and squish and move to work that stuffing back down into the end. And there's our mole. Next we'll move on to his feet and nose. Okay, to make the feet and nose of our mole, you're going to need your pin cushions, your scissors, thread and needle. Depending on the color of your felt, maybe you wanted to use a different color thread, that's up to you, it doesn't matter. And out of your template, you're going to need these two shapes, the star looking shape and the little foot shape. You're going to lay out your felt. And just like how we pin down our paper pattern for our fabric, we're going to do the same on the felt. We're going to use push pin, and we're going to pin that star nose down. Cut out one star nose. Got that done. You'll put your pin back in your pin cushion. Put that star template off to the side. Set your felt star nose off to the side. Then we're going to do the same thing. You're going to pin down your foot and you're going to make 4 feet. Okay, now that you've done all 4 of your feet, you can take your template, put it off to the side. You don't need it. Make sure all your pins are back in your pin cushion. Put that off to the side. We're done with that. And then we're going to take our needle and thread to attach our nose and feet. Same way as we did before, threading that needle. I'm going to start with the nose, which of course goes on his nose. And really, it's just come in through the back. I'm going to go through the fabric on the end. Shove it out through the front, through the felt. And that's just so we hide that ugly tail that's on the end of the knot of our thread. And then you just want to kind of make, it's probably even easier if you kind of fold it over. And you're just going to make a couple loops going through that felt nose and through the fabric of the mole. Just a couple loops, just like how we sewed our edges. Come in through the back, push out through the front. Now my mole is a little bit bigger than yours, so you just use your discretion on how many times you think you need to make those loops. I would say no less than 2 or 3, then kind of check to see how it feels. If it feels pretty secure, you like it, then what you're going to do is push it through and right out the back. So just like how we started, you're going to continue out the back through your fabric. Pull it out. And this is so we can tie off and knot the end of our thread so it doesn't come off, but you want it hidden behind the nose so that big ugly knot isn't showing. Just like how we tied off our thread before, you're going to go through your fabric, leave a little bit of a loop. You're going to put your needle through and pull to make a knot. And do that 1 or 2 more times until it feels like your thread is secure. Don't drop your needle like Miss Tracey just did. Once you know that's secured, cut off your thread. And our mole has a cute little nose. And then I will show you how to make one of the feet, because it's the same way to sew on all of the feet. So we're not going to sit here on this video to sew on every single foot. We'll just show you how to sew on one. Now I'm just tying a knot because I still had plenty of thread left over. You might need to rethread your needle. For the foot, your foot's going to go on top. So you know whenever you place the back ones on, they just kind of, we didn't really give much of a leg for the back, so you just kind of find a good place where you think it looks good to put it. The front ones go on them little flippers that we left. And then this one's pretty easy. You can just kind of sew up through the bottom. Kind of come around the edge just to really make it secure. And then really you can just go down and then go right back up through. Really how you stitch the feet on just all depends on how your mole's legs turned out. Some of you might have had a little bit longer legs, some might have little stumpy legs. If you have a lot of stuffing in there, it's really just going to depend on how the final product of your mole turned out. You might be able to continue looping down and around over the edge, the top edge of the foot. Or like mine, it's a little bit too thick for me to get in there and do that. So I'm kind of going down. I'm having to do going down through, pull it tight, and then come right back up. I'm going through the fabric and the felt each time. Really, it just depends on how your mole turned out. We would have this in the sewing classes using the sewing machines in the library as well. Some kids were able to put their stuff on with the sewing machine. Some kids had to use hand stitching. Some kids couldn't even hand stitch it because of how it turned out. They would use a hot glue gun. So it all just depends on how the final product of your mole turned out, because every mole is different. Which is not a bad thing. You want your mole to be unique, because then it's your own special project. When you get to the end, just take that around a couple times like we've done with all our other stitches. You want to pull a little bit, leaving a loop. We'll put the needle through, pull it tight. Do that just a couple times till you feel it secured. And then you're going to do that same thing for all the other feet. So you'll go around and you'll sew on all the other feet the same exact way. And when it is done, you want to make sure you've cut off any little loose threads that are sticking out. I had a couple right there. And that basically